Welcome to our webinar today. I'm here with Aleha. My name is Neil, and we are hosting a webinar on enhancing employee engagement and satisfaction. Aleha, why don't you go ahead and get started and introduce yourself?
Hey, well, my name is Aleha. I am referred to often as the Boss Whisperer. I am the owner and founder of Work Culture Works. I am a Air Force veteran, 21 years, and I'm really excited to be here with you today, Neil.
And my name is Neil. I am the founder and director of coaching at Arizona Mental Performance Training, located in Phoenix, Arizona, but available worldwide through on-site visits and virtual platforms. I'm also an Air Force veteran. I'll retire this month after 27 years. And I also am a adjunct, which means part-time professor at Grand Canyon University, where I teach psychology, and I am the mental performance coach for the men's rugby team. And so today we're talking about enhancing employee engagement and satisfaction. We're talking here from a top-down perspective. So there's a time and a place to have, from a employee low level, lower level employee conversation of how do you build culture from the bottom up. There's also a time and place to talk about creating a culture from the top down. Today's conversation is primarily directed at mid to upper level leaders. How do you create an effective culture from the top down? And we're talking about understanding critical link between employee engagement, satisfaction, and organizational success. We're talking about actionable strategies to elevate employee engagement and job satisfaction, and how to develop personalized action plans to cultivate a positive and engaging work environment. So with that, Aleha, known as the Boss Whisperer, talk about what the Boss Whisperer means and what is your approach?
Yeah, so in my studies throughout my career, I ended up getting 3 master's degrees, and now I'm working on my doctorate, all focused around work culture. And because of my extensive research and knowledge on the topic, they now refer to me as the Boss Whisperer because I can show bosses and managers and C-suite level management teams where the problem is so that they can mitigate the problem before it ever creates, problems with turnover and decreases to revenue. So I come in there and I help them out. I tell them exactly what they need to know.
Nice. So how do you use that approach to help for you to understand what their current culture, where they're going, but also
Mhm.
help them understand how they can feel empowered and also empower under other people to
Yeah.
create that awesome, effective work culture that engages employees and helps them feel satisfied in the work that they're doing.
Yeah, so I think a lot of leaders have been kind of approaching leadership and engagement from the wrong perspective. For a long time, we've been approaching it from a leadership perspective. What does the leader need? What does the C-suite team need? But in reality, if you take it from the bottom and you ask, what does the employee need? From the beginning, then in turn, the management will automatically get what they need if employees are getting what they need. If you've ever heard the phrase, if you take care of the people, the mission will take care of itself, is absolutely true. You as a leader, your job is to take care of the people first. If you give them what they need, then the mission will take care of itself.
So how do you so walk us through a scenario, like a hypothetical scenario you walk into, or a person contacts you and says, hey, I've heard about you, or I've followed you, and I'm interested in the material that you provide. What does it look like for you to have that initial conversation? Walk us through a hypothetical scenario, or maybe like, a modified version of one that you've already done before. I'm an employer. I'm a mid to upper level manager or executive. Okay, I want to improve my culture, and I contact you. What does that initial conversation look like? How do you approach that?
Well, my first question is going to be, what is your symptoms, or what do you think your symptoms are? And that's where I start. Because statistically, senior management, C-suite level management only knows about 5% of what is going on beneath them. They're only aware of 5% of the problems. So what I do is I ask them, what is your symptom that you are recognizing? And then I investigate from there, because usually it doesn't stop at that one symptom that they're aware of. There's usually a lot more going on beneath the surface. And that's where I come in.
Nice. Okay. So you have the initial conversation of, you ask me those questions. Okay, I noticed this. I noticed this. What techniques do you use to dig a little bit deeper? Because we talk a lot about the original interpretation is often a symptom.
Yeah.
How do you really dig down to that cause, the actual cause?
I start at the bottom and work my way up. So when that C-suite tells me, I think the problem is this department, or I think that the problem is, this management team or whatever, I'll go look there. I'll start there. I'll start in that department at the bottom, and I'll start asking employees. And they're not going to be honest with me at first because typically they're afraid I'm going to go run to the C-suite management. But one of the biggest aspects, one of the most important concepts of what I do is I have to make sure that those employees know that their management will never know what they tell me. I will never, ever tell management what the employees tell me, because that kills the trust, right? If people were comfortable telling their management what was happening, I wouldn't need to be there. So it's
That's
really
actually a
important.
great point. Like if teams and organizations that communicate really well, that's a lot of times the first step to solving these problems, identifying the problem, solving the problem is having open communication. And where we see culture issues is they either haven't defined what their culture is, or they haven't even had the open conversation to discuss, or whether they have the open communication or they don't feel comfortable, even when they're invited, can be a big barrier. So yeah, that's a good point that if people already did this really well and they communicated really well, you wouldn't have a job. So it starts there.
I wouldn't. And no, it's absolutely true. And no matter how good of a manager you are, no matter how much of an effort you put into, you are never, ever going to be able to pull the data that a third party can pull, ever. And you can try your best and you can be the best boss in the world. There's always going to be blind spots, always.
Okay.
And that's
So
okay.
yeah.
That's the normal process.
Right. Okay. So that's actually a good segue into the next area that we were going to jump into, cultivating that, because we have a why, right? And people always say you got to start with why, right? The Simon Sinek thing, you always have to start with why. Okay, good. We're talking about the why is the title of this webinar, enhancing employee engagement. So we want to enhance employee engagement. We want to enhance employee satisfaction, right? That's the why of what we're doing it. But ultimately, and you being a culture expert, me being a resilience and mental performance consultant, we can talk about these things as the why. Okay, that's great. But what we really get down into the work is, how do you actually do those things? So let's talk about the how of cultivating a healthy work culture. So you're gonna talk about strategies for creating inclusive, collaborative. I need to slow down when I talk. Inclusive and collaborative work environment through effective communication, conflict resolution, diversity appreciation. Okay, those are a lot of buzzwords. So let's break that down.
Yeah.
What are we actually talking about here?
Well, I think it's really important that we define what engaged is, right? Like, how do we know if our people are engaged if we don't even know what engaged is? And so understanding what the goal is to begin with, then we can create that plan to create the engaged employees and cultivate that healthy culture that we need for a successful business. So someone I like to refer to a lot, his name is Kevin Sheridan. He's one of my favorite authors. He has a book about employee engagement that is one of my go-tos. And he actually categorizes employees in three categories when we're talking about employee engagement. One is actively engaged, and those are the type of employees that you want. Those are the ones that if you take care of them, the mission will take care of itself. So that's the goal, is to have 100% staffed with actively engaged employees. Those are the types of employees that will go above and beyond the requirement or expectation. Those are the type of employees that are self-motivated and they support new employees. They contribute to new ideas. They're proud of the company brand, and they're passionate about those missions and value statements. Those are the people that you want. The second category is your ambivalent employees. Your ambivalent employees are the ones that are kind of in between. They're kind of not happy about some things, but they're still sticking around to see if it improves. Those are the people that are salvageable, but they're not where you want them to be yet. These people will do exactly what you ask of them, but absolutely nothing more. You are never going to get more than the bare minimum out of an ambivalent employee. And that's because they're kind of already on their way out with the quiet quitting. And that's another buzzword.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I've heard that one a lot too.
They rarely volunteer. You're never going to see any kind of appreciated effort from them. They come in, they do their job, and they leave. Those employees can be engaged if we take the right steps to get them there. Then you also have the third category, which is you're actively disengaged. These are your bad apples. These are the individuals that are toxic, and they can actually bring your other people down with you. If you let too many of those exist in your organization, they will affect work culture. They will affect resilience of their teammates. And one of the most important things about understanding these three categories is that ambivalent employees, the one in the middle, they're not actively engaged or disengaged. They're kind of in the middle. Those ambivalent employees are the most vulnerable, and they can be tainted by negativity if you pair them up with an actively disengaged employee. It's very easy for the actively disengaged to grow the population. So it's very important that you recognize who's actively engaged, who's ambivalent, and who's actively disengaged. One, so that you know who needs help, and two, so that you know who to pair up with. You want to make sure that you pair that ambivalent employee up with your actively engaged at all times to ensure that they are influenced by the right kind of people.
So how do you, so of course, then, kind of creating, I think it was Simon Sinek talked about the curve, and talked about that
Yeah.
tipping point of getting enough people engaged in order to make that change is what's necessary. So if you're talking about, you've got your highly motivated and your questionably motivated people, and you pair those up, you still have some of those other people, and it's not like you can ignore them, right? We talk
No,
about,
no.
optimism, positivity doesn't mean
Yeah.
ignoring negativity. It means still being aware of it. So how are you
Yeah.
aware of those things and still what do you do about those other people, other than just, like the Gary V, hire quickly and fire quickly?
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
everybody should be fired. Some people can be saved. What do you do
Yes.
about that?
Yes. I actually have a really good, it's what I call the litmus test. So you can see where your active engagement is amongst your employee populations. And that is referred to as customer experience. If you've ever heard the term customer experience, this is what your customer says they heard, saw, experienced, went through anytime they engage with your employees. Your customer experience is a reflection of your employee experience. So if your customer tells you that your employee did not take care of them, did not treat them as valued customers, if something negative happened that was very clearly intentional from the employee, that means that employee is disengaged. That employee is not giving it their best effort.
Got it.
And I want to point out one thing is it will cost you 5 times more to attract a new customer than to retain an existing customer.
I've heard
5
that as
times
well.
more.
I've heard that as well. And I've heard a very similar stat as far as, if you have the ability to save a relationship and retain an employee by creating an engaged, satisfied employee, there's a similar number about firing an employee and bringing in marketing for a new employee, onboarding and
Yes.
training, all those things. And sure, if there are instances where people are absolutely not part of your team, and you absolutely should make the tough leadership call to, you're not part of our team anymore, we got to fire you.
Yes. Yeah.
However, if you are a proactive leader and you have the ability to build those connections, there's a similar stat of you're going to have to rehire for that all over again. So
Yep.
why not do the
Yep.
internal thing and help grow your team?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And on top of all of that, a happy customer will tell 5 friends that they're happy about your organization. A dissatisfied customer will tell 10 friends that they're dissatisfied with your company.
I
And then
might even
those
go
10
further than
friends.
that. I don't know what the stats actually say, but that's why,
Yeah.
like when I go on, if I'm going to do a review, whether it's a restaurant, a store, or like a product on Amazon, one of the first things I do when I'm looking at ratings is I will go, if it's on a 5-star, I'll go to the 3-star, because the 5-star, like, oh cool, this is the greatest thing ever. The 1-star,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, this is horrible. And sometimes it's not even about the product. It's like shipping was horrible. Well, that's not the product's responsibility. But usually a 3-ish star is somebody who's like, this is pretty cool, but there's some problems, right? So that's where you're going
Yeah.
to get some good
Yeah.
feedback. But yeah, you're right. Like I would think that the numbers would be even more, because a lot of times if I'm satisfied with something, like I'll tell some people, but I'm just satisfied with it. If I'm
Yeah.
unsatisfied,
Yeah.
I'm going to talk all
Exactly.
day long.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And that's why your customer experience is going to be your litmus test. If you're curious what's going on at the level below you, just get a taste of the customer experience. You'll know who's engaged and disengaged very quickly. You'll know who fits in those three categories.
So let's talk
And
about
then,
the yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh no, it's okay. And then I was going to answer your second question, and that is some of them can be saved, right?
Yeah.
Some of them can't. In my research, I have found that 80% of disengaged employees can be fixed. They can be turned around. They can be saved. The other 20%, and it's going to be up to you to have to identify who is who, they are toxic and they are bringing the rest of your organization down. Once you identify who that 20% is, you have to cut them. You have to. They're hurting you and everything around you.
Well, and that's a good transition into our next topic of the recognizing the leader's role is to have the discernment, and it's not always going to be 100%, because with our military background, like there's a lot about the military culture that goes beyond the work center. A lot of people are very familiar with each other outside of the specific job role, and that's how the military community is built. In a lot of the corporate companies, the corporate world, that isn't the case. You come to work, you do your job, you go home, people don't know each other outside of work. And so here's where I think the leadership role is it can be uncomfortable if you've never been in a role, or in a community similar to the military's. But if the leader really wants to build a strong culture, you need to be a little bit more personable. And some people have an issue with this, where you got to keep business and private separate. However, how do you know what really is causing this person to be, quote, toxic, or just be unhelpful at work? Maybe they really are having a hard time. Maybe it is something. Maybe it's not the job. Maybe their work is actually the thing that they look forward to, but they can't
Yeah.
get themselves out of. So talk to me about recognizing the leader's role in influencing behavior in employee well-being.
Well, it all starts with knowing your people. If you're sitting down and talking to them, you understand their motivators, their innovations, what drives them, the things that make their job more difficult, the things that they may be missing, the resources that they need. If you're not sitting down and getting that information from your people, you're setting yourself up for failure. If you don't even understand what's hindering their performance to begin with, how can you help them?
Yeah, and that leans a little bit more into we both have a military background. We both have a senior leadership of highly experienced, highly educated, trained background, and then you lean more into the culture and the boss whisperers, as my education went into performance psychology. So to define that a little bit. So performance psychology actually came from, actually is now kind of the overarching that includes sports psychology. So when we look at athlete performance, mental performance is a lot of what we're talking about. Well, performance psychology is that overarching idea of everyone performs, everyone faces stress and adversity, and how can we help people with those mental and emotional skills that help them become more effective wherever it is that they're performing. I've even gone as far as to work with, I'm a stepdad, and I've worked with several stepdads on, some Facebook groups and trying to help them in their specific role. So the idea behind performance psychology is, how do you help people be more effective in every area of their life? And I love the idea of performance psychology is a science-backed, skill-based, research-backed collection of things that you could do. So you talk about resilience, and one of my favorite things to talk about is resilience, because I think a lot of people get it wrong in that resilience itself is not a skill, period. And that catches people off guard, because they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, how do I do resilience? And I'm like, when you and I were in leadership academies, when we were in the Air Force and they sent us to leadership academies, they didn't teach us leadership. And people get
Mhm.
confused by that. Leadership is the result. Leadership
Yeah.
is what you is the result of what you do. So when they teach us, when they send us to leadership academies, they teach us communication, emotional regulation, conflict resolution, vision, culture development. They don't teach us leadership. They teach us things that help us become better leaders. And that's
Yes.
where I think a lot of people misunderstand the concept of resilience. Resilience is the demonstration of how you manage your stress and handle the pressure and still perform really, really well. Resilience is the result. So what is
Yeah.
resilience? Resilience is a collection of skills that help you grow and thrive through stress and adversity. I don't even like the idea of the people that will define resilience as the ability to bounce back. We've heard bounce forward, bounce up. I had somebody the other day said, well, if you're going to
Yeah.
fall down facing up, because then you can at least see, right? Instead of looking at the ground. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of funny ways to talk about it, but humor aside, words matter. And so when people say bounce back, my response is, if you face stress and adversity, I don't want you to be the same person that you were before you faced the stress and adversity. I want you to grow through it. So I talk about resilience as a collection of skills, meaning resilience is not a trait. Resilience isn't even a skill in itself. So you want to be more resilient, you need to learn emotional regulation, you need to learn self-talk, gratitude, meditation, mindfulness. All these things that we talk to athletes about is the same things when I'm working with firefighters, military personnel, CEOs and executives, my 9 and 11-year-old boys. We talk about this stuff all the time because it is universally applicable as a collection of skills that help you grow and thrive through stress and adversity. So
Mhm.
when we talk about, so concept of performance psychology and how does it enhance leadership and team effectiveness, is your team is only going to be as effective as you are an effective leader, and you are resilient, and you are self-aware. So if you want a great culture, you want a great team, you better first become self-aware and learn these skills so that you can self-regulate, right? Because that's no different than a intimate relationship, whether you're talking about friends, family, or a spouse. Relationships are not 50-50. You
No.
are 100% responsible for your behavior and your actions, and your other half is responsible 100% for theirs. And I cannot expect anybody to complete me. I can't expect anybody to do what only I should do, and that is take care of myself and make myself the best I can be, so I can present my best self to the performance environment, regardless of what that is. And so when we talk about resilience, is stop looking at just making it through. Stop talking about, I just got to make it through Friday. Every once in a while, I just need a weekend. Got it. But that can't be your regular thing. If you hate
Yeah.
Mondays, then we got a bigger problem you need to talk about,
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
you need resilience, and resilience is based on your ability to develop skills. And so when we
Yes.
talk about, engaging, let's talk about engaging. So let's say that you are working on these things. Let's say you are really resilient. Let's say you are a really good leader. Okay. So how do you motivate people? And that's a trick question. I can't motivate you. Motivation is
Right.
internal. And so I love trick questions because it catches people off balance. Like, I can create a motivating environment. I can create reasons for you to be motivated, but only you can decide, only you can create that internal drive that motivates you. Motivation is an internal, and just like resilience, motivation is the result. So if motivation is the result, how do you create motivation? 3 letters, A, M, and P. I call it AMP, right? A, autonomy. People have to feel they have a choice. Even if you don't have a choice, you have choices within your restricted environment. You and I were both in the military. We chose to go in the military, and within the military, you give up certain rights, right? And you have a lot of
Yeah.
responsibilities, but within that, you have choice. And even I go back to the old movie, what was the Dangerous Minds, where she's the tough teacher in the really tough area of downtown LA, I think it
Yeah.
was. And people are like, we don't have a choice, we have to be here. And she's like, everybody in this room has a choice. There's some people that choose not to show up, they choose to sell drugs or be homeless or whatever it is that they do. You're choosing to be here, so don't tell me you're a victim. There's no victims in this classroom. And I love that part of the movie, because everybody has a choice, and the more you can focus on your choice, the more empowered you feel. So motivation starts with autonomy. Number
Mhm.
two, M, is mastery. And mastery, not to be confused with perfection or an end result. Mastery is the constant pursuit of excellence, the constant pursuit of getting better,
Mm.
being a lifelong learner. So if you focus on what can I do today, what am I in control of, making effective choices, autonomy, what can I do to help my situation so that I can continuously get better? It's the constant focus on mastery. So autonomy, mastery, and P is purpose. Why are you here? We talk about that all the time. The why. Why are you here? When I work with my young athletes, I say that all the time. You're not just a volleyball player. You're not just a football player. You're an athlete. So why do you choose this? Why do you choose to be here? Why do you choose to spend 6 days of your life coming here when you could be anywhere else? And a lot of times it's, oh, I love it. Okay, great. There you go. Right. So you choose to be here. You're choosing to pursue constant development, and there's a purpose associated with it. A, M, and P, that's what develops motivation. You can't rely on motivation. You have to create it through autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Okay, so developing resilient leaders, right? So I talked a little about resilience. How do you use that in your culture development, being the boss whisperer?
So very similar to your acronym, I actually have what I refer to as my seven pillars of work culture, and that is company values, customer experience, employee development, pay equity, leadership, communication, and conflict management.
Wow, nice
Those
job.
seven pillars, yeah, absolutely. Those seven pillars are absolutely the vital recipe for a healthy work culture. If you're cultivating those seven pillars, you're going to be okay. Of course, you're always going to have hiccups because no work center is perfect, and even the most resilient leader and the most resilient employee is still going to struggle from time to time. But those seven pillars, if you focus on those, your organization will have the most important aspects built from the foundation.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about leadership. So a couple of those, I draw a lot of strong. I mean, 27 years in the military. That's where the
Sure.
majority of my knowledge comes from, with some follow-up education. Now I teach at GCU. So in my time as a senior enlisted leader, I've been able to boil my leadership style down to two things. And actually, right before I do that, Winnie asked, "Can you please repeat the 7 pillars?"
You got it. That is company values, customer experience, employee development, pay equity, leadership, communication, and conflict management.
Yeah, and I'm going to post this replay on the AMPT YouTube, so you'll be able to go back and catch that again. And you can always, of course, hit up Aleha through LinkedIn, or she'll give you her contact information later. But thank you for the question, because yeah, that's good stuff. I want to write those down too. So keeping ourselves on track, and then we'll have time for Q&A in a little bit also. So go back to leadership. So again, leadership is the result. How do you become a better leader? I've been able to break it down to 2 things. If you can get these 2 things right, you are going to be either a really good leader or at least on your way to being a good leader. Empathy and
Mhm.
accountability. And the
Yes,
reason
yes.
why those are so powerful is, number one, and I use this with my rugby team all the time. I get it. Like, you have a lot of responsibilities. Life is tough. You chose to be here, but it's tough. Like at 19 to 22 years old, whether you talk about a GCU rugby player or an Air Force airman or a Marine, or whoever, I can show you empathy of, yeah, I can see why that would be difficult for you. Ultimately, right, the accountability part, and I use this all the time, and I love using this with high school athletes. I tell them, I'm always going to end up asking you one question. After I listen to you, you could whine, you complain, you can bitch, you give me all the excuses in the world. Ultimately, I'm going to ask you one question. What are you going to do about it? Or more powerfully, what can we do about it? What can I help you, right?
Mhm.
Teach you. What can I teach you? Like, what are you going to do about it? Because again, if you can get people to feel autonomy, if you can get people focused on the mastery, the constant pursuit, and you can give people, or at least help people, find a purpose, motivation, that is extremely powerful. Motivation is very powerful, but you have to know how to build it. So showing people empathy, yeah, and it really is a listening ear. And sometimes people just need to know that you're listening and say, yeah, you know what, that's difficult, and then
Yeah.
pause and say, what are we going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? That's the accountability part. And accountability doesn't have to be harsh.
No.
Accountability just has to be simply, what are we going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? Force people to think creatively, to be
Yeah.
problem solvers, to be empowered to make decisions and to do things. I mean, if somebody's on your team, they're there for a reason, right? You brought them on, or somebody brought them on for a reason, right? And if they, especially in a competitive environment like right now, I mean, I've looked at jobs on LinkedIn, and I see jobs with thousands of resumes, and of course that's an estimate.
Yeah.
But if you've got hundreds of people and you selected this one person, there must be a reason why, right? So let's
Yeah.
focus on the autonomy, mastery, and purpose so that we can rekindle that motivation. And I think that's where, some of the performance psychology stuff matched with Aleha's culture development of, from a leader's perspective, you can't motivate people, but you can kindle a reason for them to be motivated. And you also can't take responsibility for their behaviors. And I think that's where some leaders either disassociate and don't want to take accountability for what they can do, or you get leaders that will be over personal and take it personal when people aren't buying into what they're buying into.
Yeah.
And so you have to
Yeah.
be able to find that middle ground, disassociate a little bit, but take accountability where you can, end up putting the accountability and the emphasis back on the person where it should be. And that balance, I think, is what we're talking about, is that middle person, and maybe a little bit into those, that lower level, possibly toxic person that maybe just needs a little reason, right? So as a
Yeah.
leader, you're trying to
Yes.
just move them. You don't need to move them from here to here. You just need to move them from here to here, right? Little steps at a time. So using that idea of, the idea behind performance psychology and the resilience and the skills, talk to me a little bit about, from your perspective, using those things.
I really like that you brought up accountability, because that is a big one that I talk about a lot. And as you mentioned, it doesn't have to be negative. Accountability is just taking ownership of things that you are responsible for. So that's good and bad. If you've done something amazing, you should be accountable for that too. Applaud yourself, dude. You did great. And if you messed up, take accountability for that mess up, which comes with vulnerability. And Brene Brown talks a lot about vulnerability. Admitting when you're wrong is more powerful than bragging when you're right.
It is. And, I use a lot of sports analogy, and of course, sports
Yeah, of course.
psychology, performance psychology background. When I work with, so right now, one of my favorite teams to work with, aside from the GC rugby team, is a beach volleyball team, high school level club beach volleyball team. I love the sport because it's so challenging, but the community is so supportive of each other. And we talk a lot about, how does an athlete in a fast-paced sport like beach volleyball learn to overcome mistakes quickly and move on? Because that can be a difficult thing to do. Maybe
Uh-huh.
in a business environment, similarly, you feel like, oh, I made a mistake, I need to learn from this, but it's so busy and there's so much pressure. And, we talk about accountability. So what I tell the players, if you're talking about a high pressure, high stress environment, which, whether it actually is or it's a perceived stressful environment, doesn't matter. Like, your interpretation is reality. So if you feel stress, and one of the things that's stressing you out is, oh my gosh, now I have to go in and admit that I made a mistake. Growth requires adversity. And one of the things that aids growth through adversity is, every time you make a mistake, you focus less on the mistake and more on what you meant to do. And that's
Mhm.
important because if you get hung up on the thing that you did wrong and you're constantly focused on the thing you did wrong, you are more likely to do more wrong things, or you're going to be so worried about it that you're not going to be able to take effective action. So whether you're talking about the business environment where things are happening and you have to make decisions and do your job, or a sports environment where, okay, I lost that point, I got 5 seconds to reset and next serve, right? So that's a very easy analogy where, okay, now I'm in this work environment and I made a mistake and now I have to take accountability for my mistake. And then, but I still have to perform, right? You could see how somebody could easily start ruminating on these things, right? And you get into this catastrophic thinking patterns and they're like, oh my gosh. And then suddenly people are so stressed when really all it comes down to is, yeah, you made a mistake. If somebody else is going to get upset, you can't control how other people react. All you can do is consider what you have control over and what you don't have control over. And there's been times where I got pulled into, some young officer's office and I got my butt chewed. Okay, like I made a mistake. Maybe I think they made a bigger deal out of it, but that's irrelevant. I can't control how they react. All I can do is control how I now respond to that and focus on what right looks like so my mind is focused on the right things, so that next time I'm under stress, next time I'm under pressure, my mind is only focused on the right thing. If I ruminated on the bad thing, when I'm under
Yes.
pressure again, I'm still only going to be thinking about the bad thing. And it's
Yep.
going to harm my ability. It's going to restrict my ability to perform optimally. And this is where I love psychology, because I could be talking about a high school beach volleyball player, or I could be talking about an executive in a boardroom. And ultimately, all these skills and all these theories and strategies are universally applicable. What matters is the context, but the skills themselves and the approach is generally the same. I could be talking to a firefighter, security forces in the military, a high school athlete. I end up having the same conversations with people over and over again, because it's the human stress response, and how do humans effectively perform well under stress and pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of that goes back to you can actually psych yourself out by focusing on the negative side too much too.
Yeah. Well, because the brain is easily tricked. I mean, why do people love
Oh
going to
yeah.
haunted houses? Right? We know they're fake, but they still freak us out. They still make your heart race, right? Why does an exciting movie or a love story make you all soppy, right? We know it's all fake. They're
Yeah.
actors. They don't really love each other, but we still have emotional reactions to those things because your brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what you tell it is real. And that's where mental imagery, that's where self-talk, that's where gratitude, that's why performance psychology is so important, because the brain's job is to keep you safe and alive. And
Yeah.
not everything the brain does to keep you safe is productive for our contemporary work environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we have a
Mm-hmm.
brain that's still thinking you're in a cave getting hunted by a lion. That's not what we live in, but our brain has not evolved beyond that. A lot of our stress response, that fight or flight response, is based off of prehistoric living. And so if you don't have legitimate dangers in your life, your brain will still look for them, but it will find negativity, gossip, complaining, and that will be your stress response.
Yes.
If you are facing a imminent car accident on the interstate, or you're scared to death about talking in front of 25 people at work, or even strangers, right? They might even be friends of yours. But if you are
Right.
nervous and you're psyching yourself out about talking in front of people, and I've helped some people overcome public speaking with this very simple statement: if you are scared about speaking in public, you're forcing your brain into the same stress response as if you were in an imminent car accident on the interstate. Your brain and your body are going to react with the same emotional triggers, physical reactions, because your brain doesn't know the difference. All it knows is, oh my gosh, I'm under threat. It doesn't know it's simply
Yep.
just, I don't want to be embarrassed about talking in front of 20 people. But you are talking yourself into a stress response. And that's where performance psychology and resilience does its best work, is getting people to understand your stressful environment is created by your perception of your environment. And that's where the perception is reality, because your brain doesn't know. Your brain doesn't know
Yeah.
that you're simply just nervous about talking in front of people. It doesn't know the difference.
Right. Right. And
So
I,
let's,
I
sorry, go
no,
ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I was
I
just going
push
to
a
say,
lot
so
of
let's keeping
people.
us on track talking about strategies. So we talk about, we know we should have a good attitude. We know we should have a healthy culture. Let's get into the more firm how. So give me some examples of things that you've done in the past, or give me some hypotheticals of examples of following through with. We've talked about examples, we've talked about, generalities. Let's talk about us, you go into, give me an example of a successful engagement that resulted in, what did you do to help create that environment, to change the environment?
So I actually had somebody who reached out to me and said, I had a mass exodus. All my employees just walked out and I don't know why.
Ooh.
So that was a huge endeavor for me. So I had to go in and find out. I had to get information based on people that were already gone. And so a lot of the information that I ended up digging up was the employees. They had issues. They had issues getting the training that they needed, the supplies that they needed, getting the answers that they needed from their teammates. Just simple things that, had they just voiced their concern and the manager knew that those were the problems, they probably could have come to an amicable solution for the problem. But instead, all they did was talk about the negative things that they hated about the work environment. They never talked about the positive things. Management never came down and celebrated their wins. Management never recognized the top performers. Management never sent them to training. And so there was this environment where they were stirring and they were helping each other build into this negative feeling instead of talking to each other. And so instead of figuring out a solution, everybody just walked out one day.
Oh
And
boy.
I promise you, there were hints, but they were ignored. I promise you, there were hints, but management wasn't in the mix where they should have been to see those things coming. And I had to sit down and tell them, guys, you have to be much more involved. You are way too hands off with your employees. You can empower them, you can give them autonomy, but if you're not finding out what they need and what they're missing, this is going to continue to happen. And so they implemented a plan for future employees where they would regularly sit down and find out, what do you need? What are you missing? What can I do to support you? Because at that moment, they realized it wasn't even about them anymore. It was always about the employees, like I'd been telling them from the beginning.
I like that. Well,
Lack of communication is all it took to create that entire walkout.
yeah, and I think that from a performance psychology perspective, you said something that was very interesting. Is they only focused on the negative and nobody celebrated the good. And I think that
Yes.
sometimes people are hesitant because it's almost like they don't want to pat themselves on the back, right? People don't want to seem arrogant. People don't want to seem like they're putting themselves in the spotlight. And so it doesn't have to be like that, right? Like, if you don't feel comfortable celebrating yourself, then you can implement something like a peer recognition. Like, I want to recognize my coworkers for things that they've done good, and you can
Yeah.
start putting, and you could anonymously put yourself in for something. There's nothing wrong with patting yourself on the back and celebrating
No.
good performance or good outcomes. And that's where I wanted to talk a little bit about where you place your attention is really important, because what you focus on grows. This is why rumination can be such a bad thing. The rumination itself is not a negative word. Rumination simply means that what you put your focus on grows, right? And so a lot of times it's, people talk about the focusing on negative things and the downward spiral. Well, what if we reverse that and we focus more on the good things, and then the good things grow? It's not that we're ignoring bad things or negative things. We're still aware that they're there, and we still have to address those things. But the more you can focus on optimism and opportunity, the more you're going to see opportunity. And that's where I tell people, so attention is what you focus on grows. And that leads me to my number 2 is gratitude. And I even tell my athletes, and I get a little bit of, side eye when I say this to a lot of people. Gratitude practice. Gratitude is a skill, right? Gratitude is not the result. Gratitude is a skill. Optimism and a good attitude is the result. But gratitude is an actual skill. And we talk about a gratitude practice. And I do this at school. I do this with my athletes, and I tell them, think of 1 to 3 things, one to three good things that happened in the last 24 hours, and spend a couple minutes and just journal about those things. What was it about this good thing that was so good? Why did it occur? Why was it meaningful to me? And how can I encourage more good things similar to this in the future? Why, and just build that, ruminate on good things. And then suddenly you start feeling better about good things. And gratitude has been studied in so many research projects. And they've seen that if you do a gratitude journal for 30 to 60 days, every single day for just a couple minutes, you will see a significant increase in so many variables, from sleep to relationships to your attitude and your ability to find opportunities and be creative, because you're looking for opportunities all the time. And what you found, and this is what I found, I've been doing a gratitude practice going on 5 years now because I found it so amazing, and I can't expect other people to do it if I'm not doing it, right? So, but what I found was after about 60 days, I had this epiphany. And what I realized was I no longer have to reflect on good things, because what I've trained my brain is to find them as I travel throughout my day. So I'm like, I'm walking along. Oh, that was so nice. Somebody held a door for me. Oh, that was nice. I just saw somebody buy somebody else's coffee. Like, it doesn't even have to be about me. I can just witness something good, or somebody let somebody in traffic. Like, oh, that was really nice. Like, yeah, you don't have to be a jerk in traffic, right? Like,
Right.
so it's just this idea of finding those good things, ruminating on those good things. And it's not about ignoring bad things. You still have to be responsible for those things, and you still have to address conflict and negativity and toxic people. You still have to address that. But having an optimistic mindset will change your attitude about your perceived environment. Could also reduce your stress level, because now you're seeing even conflict resolution as an opportunity rather than something horrible that I have to deal with. And now you're getting that emotional trigger response, right? See how it could easily diverge into somebody hates conflict. Oh my gosh, I have to have this difficult conversation. Whereas opposed to somebody who has that gratitude or that optimistic mindset could say, okay, well, here's my chance to make things better, right? And you're going to down regulate that emotional response. You're not going to have the fight or flight response. You're going to be able to use your breathing techniques and your self-talk and your mindfulness and all these skills that you've had to learn and practice over and over again, right? So that you can use these things to change your perception of your environment so that you can better present a better, your best self to your performance environment, right? So stress is nothing more than your interpretation of your performance environment. So you have to learn these skills. And I tell people all the time, mental skills are just like physical skills. We could be sitting here talking about push-ups. We're going to have an hour workshop on push-ups. And by the time I get done, your push-ups are going to be so amazing. No, it doesn't work like that, because until you actually get your face on the ground and do the push-ups, you don't get better at them. You don't get better at gratitude until you do gratitude. You don't get better at focusing your attention, mental imagery, mindfulness, emotional regulation, all these powerful mental skills. People say, I want to be a better leader. Okay, well, what skills are you learning? Right? Communication is a skill, right? Effective listening and empathy are skills that you have to practice, but you can't do them when you're under duress, when you're under pressure, if you haven't practiced them, right? I could walk out here and say, hey, we're going to go play basketball. And you're all like, you're crazy. I don't know how to dribble a basketball, because you haven't practiced, right? So how can you expect to have effective emotional regulation under stress if you haven't learned and practiced emotional regulation? It's a skill. And that's where a lot of people get it wrong. Resilience is the result. So what skills are you learning to become more resilient? All right. So I'm going to give you the last shot out the door. And then I want to see if Winnie has any questions for us before we close out.
Of course. So I just wanted to close it out with Kevin Sheridan's top 10 engagement drivers. Very similar to what my 7 pillars of work culture are, but Kevin Sheridan's 10 engagement drivers are recognition. If you aren't recognizing when people are doing good, then that means that we're only focusing on when they're doing bad. And who wants to work in an environment like that? Career development. If you are not willing to invest in improving your people's performance and their ability to provide you with more, why would they return the favor to you? direct supervisor leadership abilities. You have to invest in teaching your people how to be better leaders and yourself. Strategy and mission. Strategy and mission is very important. I would honestly say it's probably one of the most important because everything you do should go back to your mission and strategy. As far as your recognition, base it off of what your core values are. Award someone for instance, Work Culture Works, our core values are authenticity, innovation, and empathy. So if you have an employee that truly exhibited authenticity, innovation, and empathy, that's how you award them. So it all goes back to your mission, strategy, and values. Your job content. Do your people know exactly what is expected of them, the left and right parameters, along with that azimuth? If they don't, then they're probably going to fail without even realizing it. And whose fault is that? Just a little organization in the beginning can prevent a lot of problems at the back end of it. Senior management's relationship with employees. Remember, I mentioned 5%. Senior managers only know about 5% of what's going on at the bottom. So if you establish that relationship with your people and they know that they can trust you, that they can talk to you when there are problems, when you happen to come through, then you're going to know about it before it becomes a mass exodus problem. Open and effective communication. It all leads back to that. And effective means not just saying what you think needs to be said, but saying it in an effective way so that when it's being received, someone says, I know what to do with this information. Have you ever heard someone say, don't bring me your problems without solutions?
Yep.
I'm not 100% on board with that because sometimes it takes innovative teamwork to come up with the solution, but it's very similar. Don't come to me with a problem, emotional. Come to me in a way that we can come to figure out a solution together. And then that creates ownership, shared ownership of the solution.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of the empathy comes from. Is I wasn't always on board with that statement either. Is don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. Well, what if I don't know? Like, do you want me to wait until I struggle through and come up with a half-assed solution when I could have brought it to you? We could have went to some type of committee or group of people and somebody could have raised their hand immediately and said, you know what? I know exactly what to do about that. Or I had this problem before. Could have saved me a ton of work and stress when I could have been focused on the solution. So yeah, I'm totally on with you on that one, is that we need a little bit softer approach. If you come to me with a problem, I want you to have thought about it, right? But I also don't want you to hesitate if me or somebody else could be assistance to you. We are a team here, and we all should be going in the same direction. And my solutions, your solutions have are similar solutions.
Yeah. And absolutely spend a little bit of time to come up with what you think might be a solution for the problem, but don't obsess about it, and just take it and say, hey, this is where it is, and it's probably affecting you too. So maybe we can come up with a solution that helps us both out. And that actually leads to the next one, which is coworker satisfaction and cooperation. If your coworkers aren't satisfied, there's a good chance that their complaining is going to taint you. And also, if they're not satisfied, they're not going to want to cooperate with you either.
True. Yeah, I like that. And it goes both ways. I've seen difficult environments become more manageable because people had good attitudes, right? Military deployments are one of them. You're in this dirty, dusty, hot, I'm wearing, long pants and a light jacket, and, it's 130 degrees out, and, people are still have a good attitude about the mission that we're trying to do. And then that's where gratitude is so important. You can get through a lot of things if you have gratitude, you have hope, and you have connection with other people. It could be shared pain, it could be embrace the suck, or it could really just be, hey, this is what we have, let's make the best of it. There's a lot of ways to approach it, and it doesn't always have to be so downer. It's just we have a kind of a crude humor in the military, right? Because sometimes we have to. But really, it comes down to if the empathy and the accountability part, the idea of whether you look at it as shared pain and suffering or just shared like connection with people, that
Yeah.
alone, if you feel like you have hope and you feel like there's a purpose and you feel like there's people that are there for you that are going to help and support you, man, you can make it through so much.
Yes. 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 And that's why a lot of times, as a coworker myself, even if I don't know the answer, I will still stop what I'm doing and come try to help you, because if you're struggling enough to come ask me, then that means that we need to get through this together.
Yeah, no doubt. And so I wanted to open it up,
Yeah.
see if Winnie had any questions. You could either type it into the comments or even come off of mute. And if you have anything, if you don't, that's fine. Um, so you're a facilities manager, laid off, entering into a new role, um, culture
Oh,
ambassador, and contribute to employee
yay.
engagement. Awesome. Well,
Good
you
for
and
you,
Aaliyah
Winnie.
have a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Culture ambassador. Definitely hit me up, and I can help you along the way if you have any questions with your new job.
Yeah,
Culture's not easy.
and same thing, I mean, culture is part of what I do, but I do it from a different perspective, from the psychology perspective of especially personal, right? Because there's only so many things um, that you can do, right? So where can you? I use the locus of control. You have the small circle, you have the big circle, and then you have,
Yep.
right. So inside the small circle is what you can directly control. Outside the
Yes.
small circle, but inside the big circle is things that you can influence. Outside the big circle, you can't do anything about it, right? And to simplify it, when I talk to my athletes, I can control my breathing, I can influence my heart rate, and I can't do anything about the weather, right? So you can make it as simple as that. But we were playing, we were doing beach volleyball at a tournament on the beaches in California, and they were complaining about how windy it was. I'm like, you're on the beach in California. What do you think it's going to be like? Like, stop
Right.
worrying about what you can't control. You can't do
Yeah.
anything about that. All you
No.
can do is make yourself the best that you can be and present the best self into your performance environment. You can't always control the environment. Sometimes you can
Yep.
influence things. Sometimes you can make culture better, especially if you're in a leadership position. But don't forget that the most important thing to do is to become more self-aware and make yourself more effective. That is going to always be the best answer, because if you're not the best version of yourself, you're going to have a hard time really affecting your environment and making a good
Mm-hmm.
culture. So
Mm-hmm.
into the self-development, the mastery, the autonomy, mastery, and purpose, the attention, leadership ability, some of the things that Aleha had said. You can't really control your job content. You can't control your senior management. You can influence the communication, right? Be a better listener for understanding, to be empathetic, while holding people accountable, right? It's not one or the other, it's both. And the best leaders, the best team members know how to do both.
Yep.
So, Aleha, any last thoughts before we are out of here? We're right on time, just a couple minutes left. But Winnie, I really
Yeah.
appreciate you being here, and of course, Aleha and I are both here to help you out with whatever from our experience and our education, and of course, us being the humble leaders, is we're always looking for opportunities as well. So if there's anything that you can teach us, we're always open to that conversation. But if there's anything that we can do, you are more than welcome to reach out to us on LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way, especially from a professional perspective. I'm always looking at my messages. If you ping me there, I'm on all the social medias at Mental Coach Neil, Neil at Arizona Mental Performance, or Arizona. Geez, I can't even. Neil at ArizonaMPT.com. But again, simplify it. Just hit me up on LinkedIn.
Sounds good. Yeah, me too. Make sure you hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm always responding. That's my primary method of communication. So look me up.
Awesome. So, Winnie, thanks a lot for joining us. I look forward to talking to you soon. Aleha, the Boss Whisperer, I really appreciate your time. Neil Wattier with Arizona Mental Performance Training. Look us up on LinkedIn primarily, and keep an eye out, because we're probably going to be doing these a lot more. Aleha and I have talked about how we can collaborate and bring our shared background, but also our unique specialty into helping other people. And I think we've got a short list of some ideas, and I'm really excited about this one, specifically as it relates to how, from a top-down perspective, how leaders can influence a more effective culture. And with that, you guys all have a great day, and we'll talk to you real soon.